Louise Bedford here, your host of the Talking Trading podcast. This is where traders excel. I wanted to tell you a story. It happened to me a few years ago. I used to have a letterbox on the top of my front fence. It was raining that night. I went out to get the letters, and as I reached up, I was wearing a sleeve that was a little bit baggy. I could feel a massive spider run down my wrist, past my forearm, and it nestled in my armpit. I screamed. I yelled. I started ripping off clothes in the front yard as I staggered in through the front door, trying to get the key into the lock. I could feel it underneath my armpit. Every part of me was alert. Everything was on fire. I had to get that spider off me. Oof. And sometimes in the market, we can react to a physical threat in the same way. Yes, I did get that little 8-legged freak out from under my armpit and I was fine. But in the markets, it's almost as if a physical threat can send us into a spin and make all logic go out of the window. It would have been far better for me just to calmly go inside, calmly take off my clothes and get rid of the spider. But no, there I did a strip tease on the nature strip and basically made a big fool of myself in front of the neighbours. I don't know who was watching. As a trader, we can't afford to let our emotions get the better of us. We have to notice those initial signals of stress and panic and head them off before they take hold, because our rational brain is what is required for thinking clearly, and that can't occur if we are in an emotional state. Now, that's why I wanted to invite Dr. Kai Bretz onto the show for today. I think Kai has got so many lessons. I've interviewed him in the past, but not for Talking Trading, for a different role. And I just adore what he has to say. He's from turninglight.com, and he's not just your average expert. He's an ultra marathon runner. He received the Australian Ultra Performance of the Year award back in 2019 for being the fastest ever Australian at the 24-hour World Championships, when he ran over 24 hours, 259.67 kilometres. He's also a mindset coach and a mentor, and he has his own heck of a story about a spider. So keep listening, because I know you're going to want to listen to everything Dr. Kai has to say. Kai, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, look, I'm so excited to chat with you. I've mentioned your name several times on Talking Trading, and I know all of my people are so looking forward to hearing about your story. I've just given you my spider story. Tell me about the time when you were bitten by a redback in the middle of your race.
First of all, just to acknowledge your story, because this is not about comparing like who's got the worst spider story. I'm still tense from just listening to yours, because it sounds like a really nasty encounter. Um, Completely unrelated. Maybe I just share mine, but it's not to have a bigger story. It's certainly, the spider encounter itself was not that eventful in my case, but the consequences were way more eventful than probably what you've experienced. So pretty much a year ago, I was running my biggest event ever, so a 500-kilometer race, which was a stage race over 7 days. And it was only day three, so we hadn't even done half the distance. And to put it into perspective, day three was 100 kilometers on that day. So quite a big day. The fatigue had set in already, and it was beautiful along the York Peninsula in South Australia. And at the time, I was running through some grassy area, and I noticed a pinch on my shin. Looked down, saw something black, and just brushed it off. It wasn't particularly big, I didn't really know what it was. It looked like a spider, brushed it off, and continued running as you do because I still had a long day to go. And then, long story short, shortly after, my running really degraded very, very quickly. So, and I just thought, well, it's what can happen. I didn't put two and two together, but I just had been bitten by something pretty nasty, and the venom was taking its effect. It was really slowing me down. It got my mood down. I was questioning whether I would actually make it to the finish of that stage. Went to hospital when I did in the evening, and yeah, got some treatment, but basically I was told it's better not to run from here, so better withdraw from the race. And well, I took the advice, but actually left it. So that's so on next days I was still back at the start line, but it was painful. It was really painful, and it was painful for 3 weeks after the race as well, um, because that kind of venom can actually linger for a while.
And the result of the race?
The result of I did win the race, so that was another reason. I had such a big lead on day three already, so I didn't want to quit, and I think I won it by around about 16 or 17 hours in front of the next guy. But if you don't finish, you don't win.
Absolutely. Look, there's so many aspects to that. I think with trading, it is a marathon rather than a sprint. We do have to have endurance and put up with that grind. I am not comparing exactly what I do with what you do because yours is such a physical and a mental pressure that you're dealing with. But traders have got somewhat of a similar journey, which is why we can learn from people in your situation. I love the story behind your book, Turning Right. Could you perhaps give us an idea about what inspired you to call your book Turning Right?
Absolutely. So I've noticed over the years that I'm really passionate about step changing experiences and step changing. You talked about high performance. It's the quest I'm on, not only for myself, but helping others, is step changing from high performance to really an elite level. So what's the next level up? And in 2014, I was still in the corporate world, so myself as a senior leader, and wanted to grow. Got a mentor, and that mentor pretty much told me that I was too planned, too organized. And in short, what he didn't say, but what he meant was I was too German, which is my background. So and and it actually shook me because it's that got me very, very far. It's being organized, disciplined, and doing what I needed to do. So I was running marathons, wanted to get better and better, and I was just sticking to the plan and executing it. Now, what I had to experience was that a different approach could catapult me to the next level. So just discipline on its own, where's the shock to the system, which unlocks just another level. And so what he prescribed me was a mystery run. So a completely new training format of just saying, go out for a run with led by a friend, and just do whatever he does. So without knowing what would be happening is I wouldn't know how long we would run for, how fast we would run, and I was really fearful of that kind of format because on top of my mind, the question was, when is it fair to give up? And I'm sure that is not only in sports, people experience that. When is it fair to give up? It's that motivation not to fail, and which really keeps us small rather than expand to another level. So I had to experience, well, when is it fair to give up myself? And what happened on day one? This friend picked me up from home and looked through the garden gate, smiling from ear to ear, turned right, and we were going to start the run. And that was the moment where we hadn't even run a single meter, but it already shook me because I realized I'd never ever turned right out of my garden gate. So here I was wanting to shift somehow my performance, but not even be prepared to do anything different from any other day. And it's that kind of insanity, that definition of the insanity of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So metaphorically, what I somehow did from there onwards was search for turning right opportunities, saying where can I just do something which is a shock to the system, which I wouldn't do normally, and just experience and explore. Does it help me or not? And so it's all about turning right. The book is about that, and it's in essence it's a metaphor for transformation.
Mm. I've got so many things going through my mind with this. One of them is from a neurological perspective, there's the concept called neurogenesis. And that is when your brain is under pressure because something different has occurred and you're having to create new neural pathways to find your way around this. Your brain does a big comparison back through the filing cabinets. Do I know? How do I relate with this? Am I familiar with this type of event? And if it doesn't find much in those filing cabinets, it has to forge forward and find a new way. So it's interesting to me because it sounds like you'd forced your mind into neurogenesis in order to grow in other areas, put up with that uncertainty and deal with the vagaries of a friend navigating instead of you. Love that. Yeah.
Sounds like a brilliant explanation neurologically, and I think that is what is not actually linked to running at all. So we can all do that, and it's about taking our strength and seeing what would be a complementary opposite. So take discipline, which is a strength, but if we overdo discipline, it becomes somehow restrictive. And so I just took exploration as an opposite because exploration is not very disciplined. It's like, okay, let's see what happens. That was the approach of the run. And then see does the balance of the two, discipline and exploration, find something new. And you're right, yeah, something new emerged neurologically.
I like that. Traders, we do need to do the same sort of thing again and again and again. And sometimes that can be difficult because the market doesn't always cooperate with what we've seen in the past. They'll there'll be little fires that need to be put out. There'll be some little landmine over here. So I think for everything, you try to plan as much as you can, but then to have that flexibility to be open to other events should they take your breath away. Now, I wanted to talk more about you were thinking in advance before that run about how would you know when to quit. Let's talk about that. Like before you do a big run, you know the finish line. You've trained for it, so you know what to expect. So it's, from the sounds of it, very unlikely that you're going to give up while you've got that end goal in mind. When you don't have that end goal, trading doesn't have an end goal, you see, Kai. It is one of those things that goes on and on. What would your advice be for people who don't have an end goal and a finish point?
Um, Even though I'll just reflect on running, even though I might have an end goal in the run, training doesn't have an end goal either. It's like it's really and even the runs when you take a 24-hour run, which yes it has an end goal in 24 hours, but it is actually far too far in the future for the mind to comprehend it. So what I can relate to myself is focusing on the process rather than the outcome. Because any outcome thinking, so it's important to have an aspiration, to have even a goal, and to have clarity of what we're after. So an outcome, but then I tend to drop it and really focus on the process because clinging too much to the outcome can easily trigger our brains to go into that fight, flight, freeze state, which is not a high performing state. So it's back to that motivation not to fail. And while focusing on a process, it's the simple question is right now, am I doing the best I can do? And and that is very simple. That's all I can do. It might not even be enough to get to the goal, but it's the best I can do, and it would be worse somehow stressing and therefore even underperforming from there.
Mm. I like that. I think traders, we do need to have that goal as being the process rather than an end point because it can get wrapped up with identity as well. I remember my first editor saying before I brought out my first book, she said, look, this can go one of two ways. Either you're going to go on and be an amazing trader because you've put everything down on paper and you're going to follow from a congruence point of view what you've written, or you are going to absolutely get swept away with your identity and blow everything because your ego is going to get out of whack. So she she was quite right. I think identity can be a difficult thing for traders. We don't quite have a normal job. It's not something that people tell their children, when you grow up, I hope you're going to be a trader. I'm wondering with you, tell me more about the role of identity for you. You've got so many accolades now. You've won awards. People know you. Dr. Kai Bretz, you're the one. People think of you in such a highly esteemed way. Has that fouled up your training and your methods at all?
Um, I love the topic of identity because obviously we all need an identity, but then it is restrictive. Because an identity always is a concept, and the concept in itself is pretty firm and rigid. And when we're talking about agility, that kind of rigidity is very opposing and doesn't really help. So if I identify as the fast runner from the last World Championships, well, that is very restrictive of just dealing with runs which are not as fast. So I was a few months ago, I was trying to ramp up training again, and it took me a while to just acknowledge that where I was at that point was not at my peak. And so I had to first drop that identity of I'm that amazing runner. Well, I'm just a runner who is training. And the best I can do is be present here and drop anything around me. And then so that's the short term challenges I find with identity. It's just they can be very restrictive. But then on a longer trajectory, I find it's very much linked to the topic of consciousness and really seeing what are the different levels we basically can pitch. So there is in very simple terms there is the kind of victim mentality or identity, which is outside in. Well, other people define who I am, and many of us are in that place, and it feels right because other people tell us whether we are good or bad, or our results. Take our results. I mean, and then a next level up would be the author of our destiny. Of That's obviously a way more powerful identity of saying, well, I'm the author, and we might switch between those two. Have the good days, the bad days somehow, but where's our center of gravity? And then to be very clear, there are levels which are higher than that, where we notice that things are just coming through us. So we might be the person doing things, but it's actually bigger than that. And anybody who has had flow experiences as a state knows that identity pretty much feels like it has dropped away, at least temporarily. And while that might be just a state, it can also be a stage where it's a bit more. We are a bit lighter, and we're not as hung up on the doctorate I did in whenever it was 2005. I mean, I have evolved from there, and I'm not just that person.
That is sometimes difficult for people to accept too, that their iteration of themselves right now is very unlikely to be the same as in the next 5 years. It is fascinating the number of people that get stuck with where they're at. I'm interested as well, you're talking about looking at the process. What about when you hit a plateau? Because the outcome does have an impact as to whether you're thinking you're on track. If you hit a plateau in your training and you feel that you're not getting beyond it, has that happened to you in the past? And what can you do if you're in that situation again?
I would even say anybody who hasn't hit a plateau is not doing things seriously. So, because it's the nature of that path to mastery that we hit plateaus. So, it's nice to be on the upward trajectory. And it all happens. So, yes, we do. We train or we somehow we learn what it takes to be a good trader and we get better. So it's the upward trajectory. And everybody loves that kind of it's positive feedback loop and it helps. But sooner or later there will be a plateau or it might even go backwards. And now it comes back to our inner game, which I'm also very passionate about, which is a lot of that is the meaning making. So what does it mean being on a plateau? So when we say nothing is moving, that's just it's actually not right. On the plateau, there's a lot of integration happening. There is a lot of what beforehand we needed to do consciously, we can now do somewhat subconsciously, and it's just integrated. It just happens. So there's a lot happening in there. And to get onto the next S curve, that is when that next S curve is basically brewing. We just can't see the fruits yet. So I think when there is a plateau, it helps just keeping that in mind that just keep moving and break at some point there will be a breakthrough if we keep going because the one of the biggest enemies of mastery is that kind of dabbler who says I like the upward trajectory, it's moving, but whenever we hit the plateau, we drop it. We say, "Oh, I love running, and I'm a passionate runner." Until there's a plateau, well, then I become somebody who goes fishing, and then I go and do sailing, and then I go and do table tennis, whatever it might be. It's 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 not a very mature um, view at that kind of mastery curve because if we constantly swap and somehow give up, it's we will just recreate the same kind of loop. The plateau is real and there's nothing wrong with the plateau.
So expect it and work out how you're going to manage around it. And that goes for traders as well. So if you're hitting a plateau with your trading, you can't break through a particular income level, perhaps there's something there that you have been trying to trade the FX market, but it's not working for you, then the thing is that you can actually look at the miniature segments of your actions, see whether any of those need to improve. And if you can't see it for yourself, then you can look at looking towards a friendship group or a mentor. Have you got mentors to help you, Kai, with everything that you're doing? You're very self-directed. I can hear that you're very accountable to yourself. But what about outward accountability? How does that fit into your training?
I do use it tactically. So it's at the moment, for example, with running, I don't have a running coach, but accountability can come in different ways. So even announcing that I will do a certain event, and just whether it's to friends, to family, and even even signing up for something. It doesn't have to be too public. Just signing up, there is an accountability, and then it generates a very healthy pressure of saying, well, there's something in the calendar, so I better do something to. I will not rock up unprepared to a 500-kilometer run. That's one way. But then there's also in terms of personal progression. So I'm working with leaders as a facilitator, as a coach, and I have my mentors and teachers there where I keep developing and keep myself honest of saying, yeah, I think I'm doing a good job at the moment, but it can be way better. So it's just and that's not a self judgment. That's just that kind of yeah. I want to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all run out of energy at different times. I mean, sometimes you can be surprised how far you can go before you actually need to check in. But other times, we can be a bit more fragile and it can depend on what's happening in your life. I do recommend to traders that if they've got something going poorly with their spouse or their parents or their children, that they actually take a break from trading. You can make a series of awful decisions while your brain is trying to solve a bigger problem. Do you take breaks at all, or is this a way of life for you?
No, breaks are very important. I, I believe in periodization. So there's periods where I'm just training very hard. It's towards an event, and then after an event, I need to regenerate. So there is time which is both physically I need to recover, otherwise there will be injuries. But as you mentioned, the mental recovery is even more important, and then there is the time impact of while training hard. I have very little time. It's I won't be going out a lot. I won't be very social for prolonged periods of time. So catching up in a way, and that is listening to the body and just seeing where am I at, and having those kind of periods where it's more like a wave. It's I find it very helpful, and that's beyond running. It's just an
Yeah.
example.
I think both you and I enjoy meditation as well. It doesn't appeal to everybody, admittedly. There's actually a study that says 17% of people who meditate actually get more pressured and stressed after meditating and during meditating. So, this advice might not be across the board, but in general terms, people often enjoy meditation. How do you use meditation in your own strategy?
So I meditate approximately an hour a day. So it's on the dedicated side. Not surprisingly from my backstory, but I find it very beneficial. And I don't mean that the sessions themselves have to be blissful. Quite often they are not blissful at all. They're very challenging, and but if I look at how I feel in general, and afterwards, it's I do know that they calm me down, they make me more present, more connected to other people. So there's a lot of research of the benefits of meditation, and my advice to anybody who does give it a go or who already is meditating is form a habit, and habits are best formed somehow by doing things regularly and with a very low entry gate. So don't commit to an hour a day at the beginning. Just and you never need to get there, but do it 5 minutes every day, and don't skip the 5 minutes because we all have 5 minutes. It's just making it happen and piggybacking it off something else in the calendar. So in the diary, if we say, for example, I always meditate just before I brush my teeth, then it has a place in the calendar, and it's a bit easier than saying, well, I will find 5 minutes tomorrow. Well, the 5 minutes are there, but we just might never get to it.
I love that strategy. The strategy of pairing is so important, so much to do with habit formation. If you've got something that's already in motion, if you can piggyback off that thing that's already in motion, it can really help. And I've got to ask for a bit of personal advice here. This makes me feel better to know that it's an hour a day for you. I've got that Calm app. It's CALM app. Now, Calm is terrific. It gives you daily meditations, like little short ones, and you can do longer ones for sleep if you want. And there's some masterclass type of stuff in there too. Is it a problem that I've done something every day for at least the last 3 years? When does it become an addiction?
Oh, it's a great question. With an addiction, I would ask, do you see any negative impact from it?
The
So is there any
negative,
obsession?
yes, there's one negative impact is I have trouble falling back to sleep if I don't listen to it. So I did a cold turkey. I'll tell you what I've done, and you can give me some advice. I did a cold turkey on it. I went to Europe, and I made sure that that Calm app, it wasn't part of my routine. That's the fresh start psychology concept. You go somewhere different and you can start all over again, and you can adopt a habit that suits you. And I do recommend that method. It worked like a charm while I was in Europe. And then as soon as I got home, bang, I'm straight back into that habit of needing it to fall back to sleep. It might not be a problem as long as I've always got Wi-Fi. Maybe it is a problem though. I don't know. Do you have to meditate, or is it something that you still consider a choice? Where do you sit with that?
Um, I think I see it as a choice, and there are also exceptions, or just days where for whatever reason it doesn't happen. Um, what is coming to mind is some I heard that on a meditation podcast recently, which saying that, well, any meditation is just another it's just another method. And some people take it as a method to calm down, others as a method to free themselves, but it's a method. And what's important with a method is that at some point it traps us. So while it helps us, it also traps us, and that's in a way what you're describing. And the analogy which I really like is saying, well, use them. So when you have a canoe to cross a river, well, use the canoe to cross the river, but don't carry the canoe with you when you're someone not on the river. So that's probably what one can play with, of saying, well, am I on the river? Then yes, use the canoe. So yes, meditate. But we should be okay also not being obsessed by it. And that might be something we meditate on. So, well, and I know the paradox in there.
I like that you've put it into the terminology of a choice. I'm going to choose to use this tool, but I may choose not to. Even that actually gives me some freedom. Now, Kai, I do remember a time we were chatting and you were saying that you'd got horribly lost in a race. And I'd like to start to land this plane because your story about this has given me inspiration every time I get lost, which is very frequent because I'm pretty much locationally challenged, shall we say. Can you tell this story? And then I'd like to ask you, how can people get in touch with you and what's the next step? So tell the story about you getting lost.
So it was the race was called Delirious West 200 miler. So Delirious West, I wasn't delirious, but I was leading that race, a 340, 350 kilometer race, and first night into the race, I had to get off the beach in Western Australia, and I couldn't find the exit of the beach onto the trail into the sand dunes. And I looked around and thought I'd seen it, but I did get lost, and I got so stuck within the next hour in thick bushland, Western Australia, snake infested, pitch black. So it was not, and then obviously that's not where I was supposed to be. Some are stressed as well. Well, there's a race going on, and I'm just here stuck, like physically stuck. I could not move more than a few centimeters right and left. The thick bushes were just absolutely keeping me trapped. Luckily, we all, as safety measure, we all had SOS beacons, so activated that, and via satellite system in the US, it somehow alerted people, and they send out a search group, which got me like 2 hours later. But 2 hours in the middle of the night where you can't see and don't know what kind of animals are around you are a very, very long time. And it was, I only noticed it afterwards. It was really like a survival situation. Like my brain interpreted it as a survival situation, and it could have gone horribly wrong. It's if I had stepped on one of those nasty Australian creatures, which we have plenty of, it was not a place where would have been easy to evacuate me from.
Mm. And I like the thought that Even somebody at your level can make a mistake, because we often think that high performance individuals, they've got there because they've made so few mistakes, but actually it can happen at any time. As a trader, some of my more advanced traders, they actually practically step on rakes all day, and it's only 3 or 4 trades each year that make them their fortune. So it's okay to make mistakes. And Kai, I have just loved everything that you've said. You're from turningraght.com.au. Is it .au?
.au will get you there, but you can skip the .au. So
Okay.
turningraght.com.
All right. I wanted to check that because I wanted to make sure. Now, how can people get in touch with you, and what do you think people's next steps should be?
So I'm, as I said, I'm really passionate about helping high performers step up into the next level, whether it's elite or however you want to call that. And if what we've talked about inspires you, you can certainly have a look at my website. You can send me an email, very simple, Ky at turningraght.com. Find me on socials, LinkedIn and the like. And what I do offer, especially to whether it's corporates or other leaders, does not really matter. But what I focus on is personal one-on-one coaching to really take people on a journey and help them, but also build high-performing teams and facilitate those kind of workshops and keynote speeches for events.
That's fantastic. I think there's so much to be gained by one-on-one discussions as well as group work. So it's so lovely that you've been able to straddle these two key areas. If there was something that you wanted me to ask that I didn't get around to asking, Kai, have a think now. Is there anything that you'd like to leave as a parting note for my Talking Trading listeners?
To ask. Maybe to the listeners, it's so my book is called Turning Right, and it has the subtitle Inspire the Magic. And maybe we can just leave everybody with the question of what magic each one of us wants to inspire. So, what's the magic you want to inspire, and what are you doing to do so?
Oof, powerful. Kai, you're a superstar. I love your LinkedIn posts. Everybody should be on LinkedIn and get those posts. Honestly, they just bring so much light to my life. Thank you so much for appearing on the show. It's a big honor for me to chat with you again. And for everybody listening, enjoy your trading week and stay tuned next week for Talking Trading.